Welcome to the Center Clueless podcast, a podcast that takes a day-by-day approach to politics. I am Billy Ray Brewton.
I am the triumphant Erik Surwill.
Triumphant?
Oh yeah, yeah. We got my mother-in-law here finally.
Oh, that's right.
And you know what's funny is I'm ready to bounce the Rubble. You ever heard that term before? Bounce the Rubble?
No, I haven't actually.
So the conversation is, you know how like when you win something and you still want to go back and do more, even though you already won. And the analogy is, if you go in and bomb someplace and it's totally destroyed, it's an absolute waste to go in there again and drop bombs again and bounce the Rubble, right?
Oh, gotcha.
Like, why would you ever fucking do that, right? But yeah, no, it's literally the culmination of like this 17-year process for her to come in on the least privileged visa that you can have, which they have like an F1 through F4. She was an F4 because she applied through her sister. And so as an example, if your spouse is coming in, they're an F1 and there are an unlimited number of visas per year. Mm-hmm. On an F4, it's relegated to a couple 100,000, I think. I could be off on that number a little bit. It might be more or slightly less, but it's 15 years for the average person to get in here. And, but I'm still not happy about how the consular process went. And I am going to absolutely start writing letters to editors, whatever it takes, because I think that the process for people to come here is broken, absolutely broken. And it's a political football. And that's part of why it's broken. As an example, when Trump was fucking president, he reduced funding in certain areas. They moved a lot of people around, so they reorganized departments. And what it did is it slowed down the federal government, which was the ultimate goal of what they were doing. So in other words, the process is too susceptible to political manipulation. We need to sit down, find out rules that both sides can deal with, and then just start applying them with full professionalism, full service available, because it was terrible. The process, and I'll leave it at that. But
lucky for you, neither side seems to be interested in addressing it. So
great, yeah, right.
Lucky for you. Well, it's been another relatively slow news week. I mean, it's not. I mean, there've been things. There've been things, and we're going to talk about some of those things. I guess. Look, I mean, we'll talk about this later. But by the time you get to the third indictment, is it really as exciting as the first two?
No, for me it is. Right. Because,
well, I know, and we're going to get. And for me, it is too, for certain reasons.
Oh no, it absolutely is, because as the indictments keep coming, the ability for the Republican side of the aisle to keep blowing it off like it's not a big deal becomes less and less powerful. Like, yo, he's a fucking criminal already.
Yeah.
Go move on from this asshole, because there are other advocates for the conservative mindset that could do a much better job.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we don't really have a compelling cancel corner this week. However,
right.
I have a new little segment to drop that in the weeks where we just don't have a good enough cancel corner, we're going to drop a brand new series, which I am calling Ad Hominem.
Oh my God.
That is Willie Horton.
Willie Horton. You're doing a Willie.
No, we're not doing a Willie Horton ad.
No, I understand, but
Ad Hominem is a series where we are going to look at a political ad, and then we're just going to discuss it. And, it's election time again. You're starting to see all sorts of ads roll, so we're going to get some really interesting ones. But this one just seemed like the absolute perfect one to kick off with. And I'm not even going to tell you about my feelings on it. I'm just going to play the ad, and then we're going to discuss. So here we are, everyone.
Okay, let's go.
Joe Biden had the largest public investment in social infrastructure and environmental programs that is actually finishing what FDR started, that LBJ expanded on, and Joe Biden is attempting to complete. Programs to address education, medical care, urban problems, rural poverty, transportation, Medicare, Medicaid, labor unions. And he still is working on it.
I hadn't forgotten about that yet, but go ahead.
So I got to say, I got to give Joe Biden's team That's one of the best political ads I've seen in a very long time.
Right.
For so many reasons. For the fact that it just completely owns Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Right.
And I mean that's beauty in itself, but just like also the humor behind it and the sense of like fun and play behind it. I'm like, I want to see more ads like this from Joe Biden.
Right.
Because they're fucking great.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of the conservatives that try to attack Joe Biden with me, they're like, why do you want Joe Biden? And when they list all of his maybe real, probably exaggerated issues, right? The issues about what everybody talk about, like about his cognitive ability, all that bullshit. Everybody knows people who are older sometimes slow down at night, as an example. That doesn't mean that they're not fit to be president. But anyways, but I always say it's his team that I'm voting for, and that's what I'm voting for. Whatever had the presence to take what she said and turn it into a political ad in less than a day. It was several hours.
Yeah.
That right there shows a level of, again, political like presence and understanding. And the other thing is her intonation couldn't be more on point for what they would do with an actor anyways.
Yeah.
It is. And you know what? This is the problem. So we talk about the problem with Trump on here all the time. This is the problem with MTG, right? Is she has no self-awareness whatsoever. Like, there are people on the center, right, and right who are like, how did she not see this coming?
Yeah.
And she didn't, because she doesn't listen to her people. She doesn't listen to the other people in the party. And now, right, as we discussed last week, she was kicked out of the Freedom Caucus. This is just, and her response was so anemic. She put a response on Twitter, which was fucking anemic. And you can get, in other words, the reason why this is such an awesome ad is as you get into the next layer, you go, oh, wait, they took her comments and they made and then when you get into it, she is actually against those things that she was talking about. And how can you be against that stuff?
Yeah.
The only thing in there where it got a little sideways was where she said, urban problems.
Yeah.
Which was her dog whistle in there, right? Man, that was amazing. I'm glad you brought that because I had forgot to bring that up today. That was amazing.
I am always obsessed with like really good political ads, even if they're terrible ads. If they're well made, and a good example would be the Willie Horton ad. It's a horrible ad, like absolutely racist, absolutely terrible, and really kind of set the paradigm for what political ads are today.
Right. Which, by the way, I just want to say something real quick. For all you lefties out there who love and follow Rick Wilson of the Lincoln Project, he did the Willie Horton ad.
Oh, yeah.
Just FYI.
Yeah. Lee Atwater had a hand in it as well.
It was Rick Wilson's game, dude. That was Rick Wilson. That was his first big win that catapulted him inside the Republican.
It was, but let's just be clear. Lee Atwater had a big hand in that. I directed a show at Hollywood Fringe a couple years ago about Lee Atwater, so I'm kind of obsessed with him. And that was very much. It might have been Rick Wilson who implemented it. But Lee Atwater had his hand in that.
Sure.
But that said, horrible ad, but super effective, right? Like super effective, horrible ad. And, we're going to be getting so many more of those. And, I can't wait personally because I love really shitty ads and really great ads. And I can't wait till we start getting all the ads with the guns and the... And the family sitting there holding the guns in the cornfield. I can't fucking wait.
That's a very popular thing to do amongst some program people. I had an individual who I do work with. I'm not going to name them because I don't know that they want to be outed. And they're very religious, but I don't mean religious like they're just religious. And they live and I should have seen it coming. And one day he's like, we were discussing guns. And he's like, well, I think what best demonstrates this. And then he shows me a picture, and it's his 5-year-old. He's got like 7 kids. Yeah. It's his 5-year-old to his 17-year-old, all sitting there with guns. And I'm like, and it's a thing. It's a thing that some of those people. So that's it's interesting about those types of pictures is that's a very culturally gun. Wait, sorry, go ahead.
some of those people, Eric.
Some of those people. Yeah. Shit.
Those deplorables, Eric.
No. Listen, I'm pro-gun. Guess what? My daughter doesn't know there's a gun in the house. I don't take it out when she's here. I have it in a safe. It's a safe I could get into pretty quickly. It's got a good, push button.
Eric's password is 1234. Everyone,
and it's not. But I don't believe. I personally don't believe in inculcating children into guns. And I know that if other people want to do that with their children, that's fine. I have no problems with that. But it's weird and gross to a lot of people who aren't comfortable with weapons. And those pictures of the kids, man, there's nothing. I think there's nothing more politically damaging to the pro-gun side than pictures of children with weapons in their hands. It's just okay.
Yeah, I mean, when I was young, I learned how to use a gun. I learned how to use it safely and responsibly. I was never allowed to use a handgun. It was always a rifle. It was always a rifle. I was taught how to use it safely, and if I did not use it safely, I got in trouble. And I was told, and that was a thing.
I got in trouble.
No, not trouble, but I was told, I was
Billy, you're not allowed to shoot the neighbor's dog. Sorry, Dad.
No. I'm talking about like proper gun handling and proper gun safety. But I was not allowed to use handguns, and so I certainly didn't. My parents certainly didn't go around taking pictures of me and putting on Christmas cards.
Right,
like that would have been uncouth, and I don't know when in the world that became couth, but it's ridiculous. Anytime I see that, I'm like, wow, someone in this family has a very small penis.
Well, I mean, I don't know. What's weird is I wish it was about their penis, right? I wish it was about their penis. I
think it is psychologically.
I don't understand how people are numb to the fact that, to me, that's almost the same thing. Look, so I'm about to say something controversial here.
Oh no!
It's almost the same thing as people putting pictures of their children in the middle of, the what do they call it? Oh my God, why is my brain not working? So I apologize. My brain has stopped working. Help me out with the drag queen. Okay, so when you have pictures, not of drag queens who are dressed, sitting at the front, but there are videos and pictures out there of drag queens essentially doing strip teases in front of children. That's the same kind of picture. The first thing I ask myself is, what the fuck are you doing as a parent, having your child put dollar bills into the garter of a stripper? That's lost. That's off script, which is not the same as Drag Queen Story Hour. Let's be clear there. It's the same thing to have your kids there with guns. It's pornographic, right? It's just pornographic.
No, I don't disagree with that at all. And it is very different. Like Drag Queen Story, I don't think there's anything wrong with children being exposed to drag queens, understanding what drag is. Exactly. And because drag is an art form, and it can be very beautiful, and it can be very inspiring, it can be very uplifting. But agree, like no child needs to be putting a fucking dollar bill into someone's G-string. Like I question your parenting if that's something that you allow your child to do. Right.
And my point is that the pictures of children with weapons is the same kind of.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that children should look. So when you were talking about, in fact, you and I have discussed your past with weapons before, and to me, that sounds like a almost very American space where you're trained how to use a weapon. You might need to use a weapon as a tool, right?
Sure.
It highlights the use of weapons as tools in Americana even. But man, it ain't the same as holding a machine gun.
No. No, look, I was taught how to use a weapon for hunting, but I never hunted because I didn't like killing animals. So I just never went hunting. I learned how to use the gun. I learned how to hunt. I just didn't like doing it. It was the same thing with fishing. My dad liked to go fishing. I didn't like fishing because I didn't like killing a bunch of fish. Like, I was like, I mean, I let other people do the killing, and then I enjoy
you'll eat them, Billy Ray. Yeah.
Oh, I'll eat the shit out of them, but I don't want to be the one, killing them and gutting them and doing all that stuff. Like, I was a soft, sensitive child, and I didn't want to kill other living things. Now I'm like, fuck it, bring me some goat. No, I'm kidding.
No, bring me some goat.
Well, moving on from ad hominem, this is another this isn't even a segment, but it could be. And if it was a segment, I would call it the dumbest motherfucker at the moment segment.
We should do that. No, actually, we should do that. We should do the dumbest motherfucker every week, even. But go ahead.
Dumbest motherfucker at the moment. And this week, it's this guy.
Yeah.
So, or as
right.
Trump says, Ron DeSanctimonious versus Bella. So let's be clear. You're the governor of Florida. You are running for president of the United States. You're dropping in the polls. You're already waging war with one of the biggest companies in the world, Disney,
right,
for ridiculous reasons. And now
by the way, losing that war.
And now you're like, you know what? Now I'm going to take on the largest beer company in the country.
Right. And by the way, this will likely begin the rejuvenation of that brand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look, if DeSantis just left it, that brand is impacted. It's done. But by the way, you know what he's doing? He's bouncing the rubble. There's no more gold to be mined here. There's no more coal to be excavated. There's no more political power to be gained from pointing out that Bud Light partnered with Dylan Mulvaney in a micro niche way, not even in a broad way. It's not like Dylan was on. It's not like Dylan Mulvaney was on Channel 4 News in a commercial.
No,
right?
No.
It was one Instagram post and maybe something else. They sent them. Is it her or them? I forget. I'll say them just in case.
Yeah, err on the side of caution.
A can, right, with their name on it.
Yeah.
So I mean, okay.
Yeah. Look, he's pissed off because evidently I read that their pension fund in Florida had a bunch of Bud Light stock or a bunch of Anheuser-Busch stock.
Right.
And it lost a bunch of money because of something that he helped fucking wage. Like, he is one of the causes for that to happen. Exactly. And now he's wanting to blame them. Like, you think are you so ignorant of the legal system that you think you're going to be able to sue an American company for choosing how they want to market their product?
It's free speech.
I'm like, are you an idiot? If he actually tries to go through with that, and I actually don't think he will, I think he's just posturing. If he actually tried to sue Bud Light for that, the dude is a fucking just absolute idiot, because there's no way in hell it's going to go anywhere. And all it's going to do is help Bud Light. It's going to help Anheuser-Busch. And also, let's be clear. I know everybody's slamming and like, oh, the stock's falling and all this. But I'm like, I get that. Anheuser-Busch owns like 50 different beers.
Right.
Bud Light is just one of them. And they own a lot of popular beers. Bud Light, even if Bud Light completely went away, they're going to be fine.
Yeah. It's not
Anheuser-Busch ain't going anywhere.
Wait. So how do you hold? By the way, so what's weird is how do you hold stock in just Bud Light and not?
It's Anheuser-Busch.
So wait. So I made up that there was a separate sub company because I didn't. I just saw it and I ignored it. Right, like because I mostly ignore the ridiculousness on the right because they've been ridiculous my whole life in this way. Although it's gotten worse. So. It's Anheuser-Busch stock that went down?
I don't think you can't have just Bud Light stock. That's not the way that works.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to say is, did Anheuser-Busch stock actually go down?
Oh, it definitely went down after the Bud Light thing. Absolutely. Stock has gone down because Bud Light is their best-selling product. Like, yes, it's not their only product, but it is by far their best-selling product.
Okay, so it was at a market high of 58.71. It dropped. Wait. Hold on a second. Hold on. Let me do the. So I was wrong with those numbers, everybody. Hold on. Let's look at the 6 month. Okay. So when did that thing come out with Mulvaney? It was a
few months
May?
ago.
It was in May, right? Yeah, it was in May.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So it was at the high of 65. It dropped to 53. So it lost $12. It now sits at 58. So it's gone up $5 since that drop, right?
Yeah.
And I think that they're going to recover.
Yeah. I mean, let's be clear. Anheuser-Busch also owns Michelob, Rolling Rock, Busch, Shock Top, Natural Ice, Landshark. I mean, like, they own a lot of companies.
Yep.
They own malt liquors. They own all sorts of stuff. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And so if you want to wage a war with Disney and Anheuser-Busch just to like it's just insane watching him. It's actually amazing watching him implode this way. It is absolutely
amazing. He is
amazing.
His own worst enemy. He has so many positive things that he could campaign on. Now, I'm not saying he's a good candidate, and I'm not saying that I'd vote for him. I'm saying that there's a lot of good stuff he could campaign on, and by good stuff I mean he has outcomes that everybody on the planet would like for whatever your party is in, right? Instead, he's harping on these culture war items, and I don't know why. Yeah, it's almost as if he's either not listening to his consultants or his consultants are idiots. It's almost, in other words, he's starting to out-Trump Donald Trump again in that he's not listening or he's just being an idiot. And I don't, okay.
Well, I mean, let's be clear. I mean, they're both being right. Like he did his sit down interview with Jake Tapper for CNN, where they had promised, he's going to talk about all of his plans and stuff like that. Motherfucker didn't answer a single question. He didn't answer a single question. All he did was spout like woke nonsense. Jake Tapper actually presents him with a poll showing that the American people don't give a shit about woke. About his battle against woke. And he was like, well, people don't really know what woke is. So, and I'm like, well, are you like,
stop using that word then, buddy.
Then stop using the word.
Or get more nuanced in your conversation, which is going to show up later when we discuss his changes to the school curriculum.
Yeah. He has vastly estimated how much people give a crap about his fucking culture war.
Right.
They really genuinely don't. And let me say this. So like the whole Dylan Mulvaney thing, I'll just say like, I don't give a shit what Bud Light does to market their brand. They can do whatever they want. I'm all about beer brands being, celebrating pride and all that stuff. And I don't know enough about Dylan Mulvaney other than to say I'm at Outfest in Los Angeles and Dylan Mulvaney was the host of the opening night.
Did you speak to her?
So,
by the way, it's she, her, by the way. Did you speak to her? No?
No. I didn't speak to her. She's an influencer.
She's can bring her on the podcast, Billy Ray. Why wouldn't you speak to her? You director of a director of the largest LGBTQ.
She wasn't there walking around just talking to people. She hosted the show and got the fuck out of there. But like, she's an influencer. She's an influencer who a lot of people like, and a lot of people she drives them insane. I am one of those people that she kind of drives me insane just from what I've seen of her.
Yeah.
But, if Bud Light wants to use her as a spokesperson, go for it. Like, why does that, Kid Rock, why does that bother you? Like, why does it bother you, Kid Rock?
You know what's funny is Katie Herzog, who is the, used to work for The Spectator up north in Seattle, I think it was. And she is a canceled leftist writer. She actually wrote an impassioned defense of Dylan Mulvaney, or at least it felt impassioned for her, right?
Yeah.
And the gist of it, and many people have actually said this, is that through all of this terrible shit, Dylan Mulvaney, I got drool on the screen, Dylan Mulvaney has been positive consistently in dealing with the mess that's been created around her.
Yeah.
And whether you like Dylan Mulvaney or not, and to be fair, Dylan Mulvaney, and someone else said this, Dylan Mulvaney is cringy not because she's transgendered. Dylan Mulvaney is cringy because she is she's a drama nerd.
Yeah.
Every fucking kid in drama is cringy in this same way. It's just a matter of, and it's weird how everyone's tried to take all this stuff and create this uber monster in Dylan Mulvaney. And to Dylan Mulvaney's credit, she has walked through it and has not lost her fucking mind and is now just living her life. And so to me, I have to agree with a lot of the writers that have said this. That's, I think, a good measure of who she is, and also maybe a good measure of what she deserves back from people who discuss her, which is just some level of civility.
No, I agree.
You know,
I agree. I absolutely think she's handling it well, and she's made, the closest thing she's made to like any comments are that she was like, I understand that people may not like it, but like, can you just not be cruel?
Right. Exactly.
Which is totally fair, right? A
Right.
totally fair thing to say is like, can you just not be hateful and cruel? Like, you can disagree with me, you can disagree with Bud Light, but like, don't be cruel. And I think that's something that we've lost the ability to do as a society, is not be cruel.
Right,
And
right. Like that's one of the things that you're starting to, or at least that I'm starting to notice, is that there are people on the right and on the left who it's like their whole game is to find a reason to be cruel to the other side.
oh yeah.
And so
Oh, yeah.
at a certain point, you have to start asking yourself, what's the most important thing to those people? It's likely to find situations to be outraged about and to be cruel about. And there's no need for that. There's enough shit in this planet. There's enough shit in the societies around this world that we don't need to make up shit to be outraged about. So I was actually a Dylan Mulvaney hater at first.
Yeah.
But the reason why was not because Dylan Mulvaney was transgendered. I just have a thing about that, like drama geek shit that I just can't stand,
Yeah, and that's just a personal taste thing, and I'm the same way. I have issues with that too, and I will honestly, I think we're both weird. Shockingly, we're in agreement about something. Not really at all, but yeah, I'm still not the biggest Dylan Mulvaney in terms of the content that they produce,
right?
But
like,
I think
I'm not subscribed on Instagram.
But I think they're good people. I think they're good people. I don't think they're bad people. And I think
it's she, her, sir. I've looked it up. You can confidently call her she, her.
Okay. Well then, yeah, she's good people. Good people. I'm not going to subscribe either, but you know what? I support her right to keep on trucking. So moving on to something that I want to discuss, which I'll try not to. We haven't really discussed this on the pod before, and it's a topic that can also get very incendiary.
Here we go.
And so, what's happening now is Israel is headed towards a vote. There are thousands of people marching. They've marched from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem because basically what's happening is Benjamin Netanyahu, aka who I believe one of the worst political leaders in the world, frankly, is trying to push through a bill that will limit the court's ability to check the power of the executive. And for anyone who has followed Benjamin Netanyahu over the past however many years should not be surprised by this. It seems like he has been on a slow march towards this kind of thing for a while now.
Right.
And a lot of people are afraid this is going to lead towards a more dictatorship-like government. He is calling them reforms. Everybody with a brain knows that they're not. And this bill basically strips the Supreme Court from the power to declare government decisions unreasonable, which is already one of the last checks that this government even has.
Right.
And obviously there are a lot of people up in arms about it. I think a lot of people who are, sympathetic to the Palestinian cause are very concerned about this because they believe this is going to give Netanyahu sort of carte blanche to do what he wants to do in that region. And I don't think that is an unfair concern to have. And I guess my question is, if this was any other country in the world doing this, the United States would have already come out and blasted it. We would have already come out and say it's anti-democratic.
Right.
They shouldn't do it. But because it's Israel, we're keeping our fucking mouth shut. I still don't understand that. I do understand it, but I don't understand it. And it drives me crazy. And I'm not anti-Israel. I am absolutely not. But I see Israel, as I have for the past few years, becoming more and more sort of autocratic and theist and I don't know. It's concerning.
But it's the same thing that's been going on around the planet, right? So you see the same thing in Hungary, right? So that you saw some stuff like this going on in Belarus, right?
Yeah.
You see stuff like this going on in Turkey with Erdogan, right? That there's a push towards a unitary executive power structure. Trump really wants that here as well, right?
Oh yeah.
And there's a criticism in the West towards those types of changes. And I don't know. This is just more of the same to me. And if we're going to stand up for Western values, right, the Western values of liberal democracy, balanced government, right, we should be saying something as a country. We should be saying something as a political space, at least from the Democrat side, right, about this. And to me, it's air silence amongst the political powers in the United States right now. Specifically, have you seen anything from the Biden admin on this? I haven't.
I have not. And also to add to this, if anybody even doubts what I'm suggesting about Netanyahu, the defense minister in Israel called to delay the vote because he had so many reserve officers threatening to stop volunteering if the bill went through.
Right.
And in response to that, Netanyahu said that he was going to fire him for delaying the vote.
Right. Yeah.
So if that doesn't give you an idea of what Netanyahu is trying to do with this, nothing will. He is using this as a blank check to do whatever the fuck he wants to do. And I guarantee you, whatever the fuck he wants to do involves the Palestinians.
Yeah. Right. Or whatever. I don't know, man. It actually makes me sad because I bought into Israel as a concept as a child, as my political concepts about the world grew. I really liked the idea that we helped Israel reform itself and come back
Absolutely.
And I know many conservative Jews that like him, that
of course
want. But these are people that they're generally good people, right? It's not like we're talking about people that are necessarily racist or any of the ugliness you might see, or at least could accuse of the American right of being, right? And I just don't understand. And I really should probably sit down with one of them and talk about it, but I haven't done so because, you know what I mean?
Look, I am absolutely pro-Israel. I am not someone who is on the whole I don't want Palestinians to be killed. I don't want Palestinians dying in the streets. But I also tend to lean more towards the Israeli side of that argument than I do the Palestinian side, as a lot of people do.
Sure.
And I struggle with something in my work as a film programmer because we have something in the queer community called pinkwashing. And pinkwashing is this term used to describe sort of queer content coming out of Israel that is produced by the Israeli government, or maybe not produced, but funded partially by the Israeli government.
Funded and pushed, yeah.
And that showcases sort of a queer utopia in Israel, and sometimes they are anti-Palestinian, blah, blah, blah. And so there's a big push in the queer community to not support pinkwashing, to not show Israeli queer films. I am someone who is against that, because I don't believe in censorship. I have seen a lot of films that come out of Israel that have been funded by the Israeli government that are not problematic in any way. And I've seen some that are problematic. And I think we as programmers can distinguish between those and decide what to program. But people want to just make this blanket thing that you can't program it. I think that's bullshit. I don't think that's true. But I'll say this, I have a lot of gay Jewish friends, not a lot. I say a lot. I've got a few gay Jewish friends who go to Israel often. Some have moved there because it is in large degree a safe place to be if you are queer. I mean, as safe as you can be living in Israel, but it is a safe place for queer people to live and exist.
Right.
And they love it over there. They have an amazing time and they get to express themselves however they want. And that's great. So, and you certainly cannot say the same thing about Palestine. You cannot go do those things.
So that's what they're doing. They're taking advantage of the fact that within Islam, right?
Yeah.
It's not okay to be gay.
Exactly.
In Islam, right? And that's what they're going to lean on. And you're seeing it play out, for instance, in the United States, where Muslim populations are pushing back massively against the teaching of LGBTQ space in the school system. When, for instance, when the kids weren't allowed to opt out, at one point, between 60 and 70% of the children didn't show up for school on that day. And I don't know, I can't remember exactly where it is, but it was, I believe, around Detroit. And that's what I think. That's what I think these filmmakers, and in fact, if I'm going to take it to the next level, the Israeli government people that are funding these films are actually hammering that cultural difference, that religious difference,
Yes.
that homosexuality is absolutely not accepted as in Islam, and that's how one of the ways in which Islam can be problematic, in which Islam can be wrong, in my opinion, at least.
Let's be clear. Islam is wrong on several things.
Yeah.
I'm not one of these like far left liberals like Islam is problematic in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that as a slight on Muslims. I mean, there are a lot of good Muslims out there. But even, I mean, I'm sounding like Bill Maher now. Even the best of the really devout Muslims still think homosexuality is wrong.
Right. And to be fair, and let's be clear, when we talk about non-problematic Muslims, what we're really saying when we say that, are Muslims who are simply more secular. That's what we're saying.
Yeah, that's absolutely
the level of devotion to Islam is going to be the level of discomfort that those people have with LGBTQ lifestyles, period.
No, absolutely. And I'm not going to harp on this point too much because I just watched a documentary at Outfest. This is tangentially related. It's called 1946, The Mistranslation That Shifted a Culture. And it's a documentary all about how the word homosexual does not appear in the Bible until the year 1946. When they did a new translation of the Bible and they took two words that were in the original translation, combined them together and used the word homosexual, when in reality, neither of the words that were used to make homosexual had anything to do with homosexuality.
Right.
And so it's a really compelling documentary. And because technically what those words were referring to were like pederasts. So people who sexually exploited children or used sexuality in some sort of power position. It did not refer to homosexuality. That was something that was used by like the Living Bible and things like that.
Right.
And that's when you started seeing the word sort of propagating in there. And we could do a whole episode.
Well, I mean, although the Bible did talk about men laying with men, so that was
nope.
Does it?
You watch the documentary, and that was
really
yes. That's absolutely something that means something different than you think it is.
What does it mean?
You think it does?
Wait, what does it mean?
I can't remember the whole thing. I can't remember. No, I can't remember the whole thing. Like it goes through every single instance of the usage of the word in the Bible, and gives a thorough and intellectual argument for why it does not mean that.
Really? Wait,
absolutely,
so
it does.
You realize what you're saying? So what I thought you meant
absolutely.
was the word homosexual.
No.
You're saying that's the famous phrase that.
Well, no. Here's the thing. And this is the best example of it. One of the reverends who's talking in there, he was like, "Why on earth would the Bible say that men cannot lay with men if it does not say women cannot lay with women?" And that is, and everybody in that audience was like, "Oh shit." And that's not even the argument for it. They give a cohesive argument, but just that alone was like, oh shit, you're right.
So you're blowing my mind here.
Yeah, no. It's so interesting to hear it. And they go through the whole like Sodom and Gomorrah thing, right? And they talk about, because the whole idea is like, God destroyed the city because of all the homosexuality. And like they go into detail about like, that is not why God destroyed that city.
So why did God destroy the city?
I'm trying to remember because I literally just watched all the information there. So I don't want to speak something that's not accurate.
We should actually bring this back.
We should
time, because that's a very. I want to be clear. So does it at all talk about? Okay, so here we're getting gross. Are they talking about anal sex then? Is that still? Is there any conversation about that either? Because I was going to say, if anal sex is bad, so many people are in trouble that are straight right now. So
no. It does not talk about anal sex at all. I'm trying to remember, but it seems like what they were saying about the Sodom and Gomorrah thing.
Right? Sodomy, right?
Well,
sodomy. So all that's just bullshit.
It's pretty much all bullshit. It's pretty much all bullshit. But they do such a really thorough job because so the filmmaker is a woman who grew up with a minister whose father was a minister. She grew up her whole life, thinking that homosexuality was wrong, but she also knew that she was, that she was a lesbian as well. And so they ended up having a falling out, her and her parents. And but her dad is a subject in the film and is interviewed, and they now have a relationship, even though they totally disagree on the interpretations in the Bible. But then they also talk to other gay ministers. They talk to this woman who is sort of the authority on all of this, who has written a lot of books and who is really invested in this discussion about the mistranslations throughout the Bible. And it's just really, really fascinating. And I think that documentary is going to end up getting a good push.
What's the name out of that?
It's called 1946, A Mistranslation That Shifted a Culture.
Dude, I'm absolutely going to go look that up.
Yeah, it just played at Outfest. We're going to be playing it in Seattle at our film festival. I know we are, because it's really great. And so I'm just going to say this, and I'm going to stop talking. So what happens is they go, these people, they decide we want to look, because in 1946, when the people met to make these translations, they were like, we want to go find the notes from that meeting. And so they go to Yale University, where they have all of the notes housed. And they're going through, they're not finding anything to do with homosexuality. Then they find a letter from one of the people to one of the members in the committee saying, I don't think that we should combine these two words to the word homosexual, because that is going to weaponize a certain group of the religion right. against this group of people. And this is not even in 1946, someone was saying this is not a right thing. And they actually, as a group, decided that they were like, okay, we want to take that out. They ended up taking homosexuality out after they put it in, because they realized they had made a mistake. But then the Living Bible came along, that Living Bible for kids and shit like that. And that's when you started seeing the word populate.
If this is let's move on. But if this is accurate, that it literally voids how much conversation in the evangelical South
exactly.
is around homosexuality,
exactly.
the sin of you need to say it so you can say it in your accent. The sin of homosexuality, all that. That's all bullshit.
Yes, it is all bullshit. And that's why that documentary, I think, is so powerful. Right. That's why people need to check it out.
How fucking stupid.
It is great. And you know what? And I'll actually say the name of, hold on. I'm going to tell you the name of the woman who wrote those books, in case you want to look her.
I do.
It's Kathy Baldock, Baldock. Kathy Baldock is the woman who is sort of considered the authority on this and has written a lot of books on it, and gives lectures all over the place. I'm compelled enough now where I'm like, I want to go see her give a lecture, because it looks fascinating. Yeah. And but anywho, we won't stay on that much longer. We're actually going to take a break, as we typically do around this time, and then we will be back with more shenanigans. So stick around, and we will be right back. We are back, and we ended the last one on a real hot button topic that we're going to definitely devote a whole show to once Erik is able to do some. And I'm going to buy one of her books and do some research, and then we can just do a whole episode on it.
That's massive.
And I guarantee you, we can get the filmmaker on if we want to get her on and talk about
massive. That is massive. That is
I thought so too.
Crazy.
I thought so too. But going into the more political sphere, back into the political sphere, Erik, I think you and I were both a little put off by Florida's new school standards, but why don't you take the lead on this one and bring some righteous fury?
I'm going to start with, I don't like how it's been. So what you're seeing in the reaction from the left is this explosion towards there's one statement in there, right, which discusses that it discusses that blacks were able to, where was the exact term, that blacks were able to learn skills during slavery. And that's terrible. But what's kind of crazy is I don't like how I really don't like how that's what's being used to demonstrate, because to demonstrate that blacks maintained agency within the space of slavery is not in itself bad. What and the fact that Kamala Harris is talking about it, the fact that that's become the one nail that the left is hammering on. And I want to assert to you here, and I'm not the only one saying this, and in fact, it was in reading about this that it was conceptualized for me. The problem with the new standards is it doesn't, the term is foregrounding, right? So there's foregrounding, there's hide. So as the opposite of hiding, it doesn't foreground the terribleness of what it was like to be a slave. That they completely remove, or at least, now to their credit, they don't, it's not, you can't not talk about it. So in other words, they have their standards are what you need to have for it to be considered a legitimate, curriculum.
Yeah.
An individual teacher could teach about how terrible it was. As an example, one of the reasons why the miniseries Roots was so explosive is it foreground the absolutely horrible conditions that American slaves had to endure during slavery. And that's in a nutshell, that's the major problem with this with this curriculum, is it doesn't foreground the terribleness of slavery. That being said, I think the real reason why many advocates, many people who are angry at this, is it also doesn't foreground any of the new language. And to be fair, I support that. There's no conversation about whiteness, and all that garbage, all that Kimberly Crenshaw, bell hooks, Ibram X. Kendi horseshit. All right, grifterism, frankly, CRT. All that garbage, right? And I'm not saying CRT, I use the buzzword there. Not that CRT doesn't have a place in school, of course it does. But the pedagogies that have been pushed forward from people who have been educated in CRT is where you hear things about like how we don't like being on time is a white thing. And it's like all that weird pseudo garbage. All that's out of there. And to be fair, I support that. But where that curriculum falls short is you absolutely have to foreground the terribleness of slavery for it to honestly do anything to teach kids. And if we're going to talk about another similar subject, one of the reasons why so many people are horrified by the Holocaust is it's absolutely been foregrounded in the teaching of the Holocaust, the horrors of the Holocaust, right? Yeah. I can't remember the name of the film, but there's a film which is nothing. And I think it's like 45 minutes or more. I can't remember the exact amount of time. It's a long time where they're doing nothing but showing video of the mass graves they found in Germany. Yeah. And as a child, about 20 minutes in, I'm like, I'm like a kid, right? Like I'm 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. It was between 8 and 12. I can't remember where it was. I was a little kid though. The concept that they were all, and because what they did is it would be like the grave, it would name where it was at and how many bodies were there. And sometimes you'd see like thousands of bodies. And it was the foregrounding of the horrors of the Holocaust that has us to this day, most of us, right?
Yeah.
It's horrible. Now, there needs to be something similar, right? That's being done for the horrors of the Black experience. Gina, who we interviewed, she does some of that, right?
Yeah.
With putting in placards and documenting where lynchings happened as an example. Yeah. That's the way to not only teach about the history of what happened in slavery, but also to sort of solidify that it's not going to happen again, right? That's kind of part of the education. And that's what's missing from this curriculum. Outside of it, the messaging, though, from the left is fucking terrible and ham-handed, simplistic, and I'm going to assert you wrong. If they had said, if Kamala Harris was saying, absent from this is any real and substantive discussion of the horror of slavery, that's something I would be like, yeah, that's whoops.
Well, look,
that's
I went to public school in a rural county in Alabama. We learned all about the horrors of slavery.
right.
And our black population in that county was 0%
Right.
when I was a kid.
Right.
0%. And we learned about the horrors of slavery. We learned about the horrors of the Holocaust. Like when I was in 7th grade for, I think it was National Holocaust Remembrance Day, PBS did an airing of the documentary Shoah, which for people know is hours and hours and hours and hours and hours long. And it's just people who survived the Holocaust being interviewed. That's all
Right.
it is.
Right.
And we had to watch at least 90 minutes of that. I watched the whole fucking thing. I was so in it and just immersed in it. And I was in 7th grade.
Yeah.
And we learned all about those horrific things in terms of the Holocaust, in terms of slavery. And that was important to me growing up. And because I did grow up in a very rural part of Alabama where it was not a diverse population, it was
Right.
all white. I needed that. I needed to know what other people experienced. Like, had I not had that, who knows? I could have just been another backwards fucking redneck living in Alabama. Like,
Yes.
a lot of us could. Like, that was super important. And like, I just don't understand why half of this country, it's not half, I know it's not really half, but why any percentage of this country thinks that remembering something like that is a bad thing.
Yeah,
When you go to Germany and you're walking down the street in Germany, what do you see? You see plaques outside of every home where a Jewish person lived who was killed.
Yeah.
They're all over the city.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to remember, they didn't want to forget, because I'm sure they did not want to repeat the same mistake twice.
Right. Yeah.
And like,
it's
what's
more
wrong
than-
with
yeah,
that?
They didn't want to be monsters anymore.
Yeah.
And really, this is what's interesting is the fact that society has become less monstrous over the last 150 years. And as an example, what you'll see is up until the mid 50s, it was perfectly acceptable in international politics to conquer a country and take their shit. The fact that that one situation has changed is that's almost unique.
I would
in the history
argue
of the
that we've
world.
become less physically monstrous and more intellectually monstrous, but
Well, maybe, but intellectually, how much intellectual monstrosity must there have been to put people into camps and then
don't
gas
disagree.
them with Zyklon B? I think that, in fact, I'm going to assert that we've absolutely become more sensitive. We absolutely have become more aware of the absolute terribleness of mass murder and genocide. I just think there's better ways to communicate it. And as an example is, I don't like the fact that there are elements of the right that are trying to get away from having young children feel terrible about slavery. You need to discuss the terribleness of slavery for children to understand what's being bandied about. That being said, I do not like the elements of the radical left who think that you must inculcate that or marinate children in that so that they can feel guilty about it. I don't like that either. And so how about we do exactly what happened with you? And to be fair, I didn't have as much of a well-rounded education about the experience of blacks in the United States. But trust me, when Roots landed, when I was a kid, what was that? What year was that? 77?
that sounds about right. It was definitely in the mid-late 70s.
Yeah. My school, I went to a very liberal private school at that point. My mom working 2 and 3 jobs to put me there.
77.
And then it did show up, right? And why that film was, or why that miniseries was so impactful is it wasn't in the American zeitgeist to understand and to center the absolute horror that it was for Black Americans when they were, when their forefathers who were here. So that's like to pack people like sardines into a boat for months. It's just that alone was inhumane. And then to tear children away from their parents, to all of this, the fact that the fact that Florida's new curriculum doesn't center that, at least as part of it, is a failure, and I think a deliberate failure on the part of the people who put it together. Although I also think it's weird that the left isn't talking about the fact that it's a majority African American group under DeSantis that put that together. That what's being hidden here is the secret, oddly not talked about, conservative movement going on in the Black community right now, and Democrats, to their peril, need to start discussing that and why that's going on. And it's because many Blacks don't align with the more collectivist values of the left. And what you're starting to see, and it's funny how we're not even talking about that when that's a major part of this too, that what DeSantis did is put together a majority African-American panel who then spit this out, and you could criticize based on that, but nobody's criticizing based on that. We're going to harp on one thing, which actually doesn't. It centers the agency of Blacks. You know, there's a teacher who I follow online, and he talks about this, that, you know, there were different ways of talking about Black Americans who were enslaved, right? And it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like, you know, there was like the way Blacks were portrayed in film in the 20s and 30s, like that, oh, shucks, you know, that all, you know, the feats don't fail me now, you know, like that kind of like the fearful, sort of like subservient Black. That's not real, right? The other ways, you know, like the savage needs to be trained dumb Black. That's not real, right? Like, so this, to me, what they're harping on doesn't give me those tropes, and I just wish the left. Look, how about this? I wish that whoever in Biden's campaign did that thing to MTG should have been the one that wrote Harris's conversation about this problem.
I am definitely in favor of a more Jane Elliott approach to teaching race in classrooms.
I think
that's Jane Elliott. You know Jane Elliott?
I don't know what you mean by Jane Elliott. Wait, that's what I'm asking.
Well, Jane Elliott. You know, she's the older white woman who has always been like the. She teaches about race in classrooms. She did the what's the test where she does what's the name of the test that she does?
Is it the eyeball? Yes, I did.
Does the eye color? I did too.
Yes.
Yeah, like Jane Elliott, who like my education. I feel like my education in slavery and in you know, we didn't have critical race theory back then, but we
didn't exist, right?
But we certainly learned. And we certainly knew that because of these horrible things that had been done to Black people over the years, that they had been societally disadvantaged.
Right. And by the way, knew that Jane Elliott blue eye, brown eye, experiment or activity. I think we did that. I was so pissed off as a blue-eyed kid or green blue-eyed kid. It was horrible, and we did it for the whole day. And motherfuckers, it started turning into that Stanford prison experiment near the end. And I think that's a great way to teach kids about the ridiculousness of color being a determiner of anything, and really it sneaks it in under the cultural space of being European American and white in America, and that's why. So here's the question: shouldn't we be doing that in all schools?
Yes. We should. Like, it's ridiculous to me that I grew up in one of the most conservative states, in a conservative county, in a conservative community, and I probably got a better education on race relations than people in the most liberal states.
Right.
And why? Because I come from a state that has blood on its hands, a lot of blood on its hands, and we are cognizant of that. Not the whole state. Not the whole state, but like I spent many years in Birmingham, and Birmingham is, people have this very backwards idea of Birmingham because it was sort of the center of the civil rights movement, and a lot of horrible things happened there. But because of that, we are now so progressive, and we are now so committed to never making those same mistakes again, that you would never, ever, anybody who goes to Birmingham is shocked. And I think Alabama as a whole grapples with that and wrestles with that. And I was just part of a generation where we got a really good education in those areas because of that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the education there in those areas is as great now. I have no clue. It probably isn't, frankly. But I got it, and I'm better off for it, and so are the other people in my class.
Yeah.
And it's just insane to me that that's not being done in classrooms anymore. It's like, and why isn't it? Well, because like there's a reason why more people, like, yes, there are Holocaust deniers out there, but that's a very fringe set of people. Like we can learn about the Holocaust and we can teach the horrors of the Holocaust because we weren't the ones who did it. But when it's something that we did, we can't do that. But that's whole said. Like I got into a discussion with someone who were talking about the Holocaust and how we were the heroes and blah, blah. And I'm like, do you realize what we were doing to Japanese people here at the exact same time?
We weren't the heroes.
We're not quite the heroes. Like we were doing
yeah.
the same thing the Nazis did, just for different reasons.
Well,
and,
I mean, okay, so to be clear, we weren't gassing
I don't mean
Japanese.
gassing.
Okay, so hold on.
I don't mean gassing, but we were putting them in fucking camps.
How about this? There's literally a house 1 block over that used to be owned by a Japanese family. The house was taken from them. They were put in an internment camp, and that was it.
Yeah.
And the house is still there. It's what's so crazy about it. And it's like, that's the true horror of it, was the fact that, at least for that, the fact that we took land and property and businesses away from these families, stuck them in internment camps. Now, let's add on top of that the mess that the Germans did there. Let's just get rid of all that and start. If you can then take that same space and look at what happened to black slaves in the United States, in many ways, it's 10 times worse, right? Like because
of course it is.
Look, the biggest terrible thing, of course, in America is chattel slavery. The concept that we owned your children, and the concept that the idea that children born to black enslaved women were then put into slave. This was the child of the. Like, what are you doing? Like, the whole thing is a mess and it's terrible. And I don't feel guilty about it. I feel bad about it, but I don't feel guilty. Like I did something wrong.
Oh yeah,
You need to have children in America understand the terribleness of slavery for it not. What's the line? Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. Right? That's the line, right? And it's actually accurate. And here we are, right? Because so much of what you see nowadays, so much of the ridiculousness on the right and the left is because those individuals are either numb to or uneducated in what's happened in history in the past, both on the right and on the left. And it's just, if you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it, which is why you need to teach about and foreground the terrible conditions that Black Americans lived in while they were enslaved. So
I was watching this video, and I hate citing something that I don't have a actual site for, but I promise I'll find it and I'll mention it on the next episode. I was watching a video in one of my get stoned and scroll through videos thing, and it was a professor, and he was talking about the progressive dumbness in terms of history. And like our understanding of history. Yeah. And he had conducted this poll, and he had done it at different universities all over the country. And it was staggering. It was like 68% of students didn't realize that the original 13 colonies were on the East Coast.
Yeah, I don't.
68% of kids. And I'm like, yeah. And I know that sounds like, oh, well, that's just geography. But it's like, I've known that since I was like 7 years old.
No, I'm not. So I want to be clear. My reaction isn't pulling that off. I just can't even get it. And now, and the other thing that's funny is I'm like, shit, what are they teaching my daughter? And then I just told myself, thank God we're in private school now. Right? Jesus.
But that's the thing though, right? People get so worked up on the idea of like science and math education, but people aren't getting nearly as worked up about history education. Right. And history, which goes right into civics, it goes right into this whole like theme that we talk about on this podcast. People aren't worried enough about what kids are learning in terms of history. Now, the slavery conversation, obviously, the treatment of blacks falls into that conversation in a major way. Yeah. But it's not just that. Like kids are not being taught the fundamental history of the United States.
You know what? That's actually, by the way, this has been a great podcast, Billy Ray. You've now hit me twice that. No, looking at the general stupidity in the history around slavery is also part of the general stupidity in history in general.
Yes.
Shit.
Yes.
And that's true.
Yeah.
Because why would you teach about that if you're not teaching about anything else? And
Yeah.
the question then becomes, why wouldn't you teach about anything else? Because here's what's not going on as an example. So if you're going to be coming from the right and you want to call a lot of the people on the left, they talk about the, like the new Maoism, right? And well, who's even been taught about Mao and the terribleness of that? And
well, that's because we don't teach world history nearly the same way we used to. Like, world history is not even taught in a lot of places, like, because it's that whole well, we just need to focus on us. We don't need to worry about the world. And it's like, I got a world history education, a good world history education. Like, I feel like I'm extolling the virtues of a rural Southern education, and I guess I am. But and let me be clear, there are a lot of areas where our education was not great. Spanish, hello. But in terms of history, I feel like I got a very well-rounded history education. And it was, whether it was world history, U.S. history, Alabama history, I got the whole swath. And I think that's important. I think if you live because I think history is a three-prong approach. Let's say that you live in California, Alaska, wherever you live. You need to learn about history on a local level. So you need to learn about the history of your state. You need to know where your state fits in to the sort of the diaspora. You need to learn about United States history. You need to know where your country fits in. And you need to know world history. You need to know how all of that exists within the history of the world. And if you don't know those three things, you don't have a well-rounded history education, period. You need all three of those. And why would you not want your kids to have that? They're going to be so much more confident as they move through the world if they understand these things while moving through the world.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to me that that kids and I haven't brushed up on a lot of this stuff in years, and I could probably sit down with any high schooler today and know more about history than they do.
Which is crazy.
Crazy. I shouldn't know. They should be smarter than me. In that regard.
So here's my question. How is it then, and this is, again, that ever-present debate that we're not going to have right now, but we eventually will have. How is it that a mostly liberal-controlled public school infrastructure, the teachers union is very progressive, very left. How are they failing to push history? And they're going to point to money, right? But if we look at money is being spent. Look, if you're spending $38,000 a pupil in LA, and they are $36,000, $38,000, how are they neglecting teaching history? And what's crazy is,
I have that answer.
What is it?
Well, I think it's a couple things. I think one is, I think teachers nowadays, more and more, are becoming trained in education. They're not training in a specific area. They are training to become an educator. And that's a big difference from when I was in school.
Right. And
you went to school for history or for math or for science.
So you're right. What's funny is so here's what you're saying. So in 1970, there was a book written called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And it posited that the training of children in school, they called it the banking method, which is the children came in as empty receptacles, and you, as the bank of knowledge, filled the receptacles. And that's considered bad now. And what you want to do is have these kids trained in learning and finding things out themselves. And so what you're pointing out to me, and I would absolutely agree with you, is that is a corrupt, stupid way to train children. You have to tell children. So just all of you super left teachers out there, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, trashed. It's trash. And I'm going to, by the way, that's so controversial. You realize I just went far right there, Billy Ray. What's funny is that's it. That's the mess. The mess is that children need to be taught before they themselves can go out and seek knowledge. And by the way, maybe some of the things that they'll do when they go seek knowledge is challenge the teaching that they'd received. And I've done some of that. I'm sure you've done some of that.
Here's a good example, right? I keep alluding to like my Spanish education at school. I had a Spanish teacher. I mean, and lovely person. I don't want to say anything bad about her. She was not a Spanish teacher. She didn't go to college for Spanish. She hadn't taken a single college level Spanish course. She was an English teacher who was best qualified to teach Spanish at our school. And if anyone who walked into that classroom with even on a scale of 1 to 10, a 2 level of Spanish would have been on her level. And that's where I learned Spanish from. Now, that said, my favorite teachers, like my English teacher, my democracy teacher, they went to school specifically for that.
Right.
They went specifically for English, specifically for political science. They weren't general educators, right? They weren't required to teach multiple disciplines. They were required to teach what was in their lane. And they excelled at it because that's what they were passionate about. So, of course, they excelled in it. Now you've got a bunch of teachers who are just as skilled at teaching math as they are at teaching history. And so they're not really passionate about either of them necessarily. And so they're not the best people to be teaching the kids. No. And so then the kids are getting a dumbed down version of that education.
It's the jack of all trades, master.
We used to teach teachers in high school the same way we did professors in college. You have to be a specialist in that area. Right. And we don't do that anymore. And it's, and we see the results of that. We see what that's doing to the overall intelligence of our youth, especially in the area of history, in the area. And because there's you can have maybe not the best English teacher, but you can still go out and read books. You can read fiction. You can read nonfiction.
Right.
History, nobody generally is going out and reading history books for fun, right? You need somebody who is going to be able to sit there and really tell you about it and make you not only interested in it, but excited about it. And, if you're not excited about it, how are you going to make your kids excited about it?
You know what? The podcast is fucking with me today more so than any podcast before. I am so, because you brought that up and it was sitting right in front of me. You brought up the concept of that teachers are now educators, and really they're educators engaging in a way of teaching that is ineffective. Yeah. And so I'm now for the third time in this podcast, Billy. Jesus. I'm like back on my heels going, that's right.
I've had my coffee today. I'm on my point. Well, we're going to segue out of this. We will do a whole other episode on this at some point, but I want us to close out with something a little more fun to talk about, which is our old buddy, Donald John Trump, and this third string of indictments that he's been informed that he could be charged with 3 statutes pertaining to deprivation of rights, conspiracy to commit an offense against or defraud the United States, and tampering with a witness. Now, let's be clear. If he were convicted of one or all of these, he will spend the rest of his life in prison.
Right. But isn't this also This is
Jack Smith. This is Jack Smith.
Right, no, again. But I'm saying, isn't this the specific?
Is it the insurrection?
And isn't this the one that would disallow him to run for president under the 14th Amendment, or am I making that up?
It could.
Right. Okay, got it.
So this is
the one. So I'll tell you now. Of all of the indictments that I hope go through, it's this one that I hope go through.
Of course.
And the reason why is because I just want him to go away from the political. I'm tired of dealing with Donald Trump cognitively. I'm tired of the fact that most of my conservative friends are still, or people that I know, are still on the Trump train. They're not MAGA guys, but they're on the Trump train still, right? Because in their space, Trump was the most effective policy guy in the last whatever, fine. Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that what's crazy to me is he really was pushing an insurrection on January 6th. And the fact that we've sort of like memory hold that, and I have people who will violently argue against that with me. And I'm like, I'm sorry. You have to be, every time you get to a spot in the discussion where you can either be biased towards Trump or biased towards not Trump, these mostly guys, all guys, in fact, are just biased towards Trump. Yeah. And it's like, fine, 1, 2, 3, but 10 or 15 points of discussion. It can't just be that he was. This isn't Jack's. So this particular upcoming indictment is not some evidence that Trump is being improperly handled or unfairly dealt with. It's bullshit. He's an asshole who fomented an insurrection.
Yeah.
Probably wanted Pence to be killed. Okay, so I'm saying something strong there, but you get my point. Pence was literally hiding in a garage at one point.
But I think it's safe to say, had it happened, he wouldn't have given a shit.
Yeah, he wouldn't have lost any sleep over it.
Yeah,
he would have used it. He would have used it as he would in fact found a way to use it, right?
Yeah.
But so what do you think is the chances of this actually going down before the election?
That's the tough part, right? I think with all of these, getting them in before the election is going to be tricky because Trump's legal team is going to delay and delay and delay
Wasn't
and delay.
Wasn't it the Florida one now set for May of 2024? It was the Florida charges? Yeah.
Yes. And so I think
not good for Trump, by the way. Not good for Trump.
No, I think the big question is less of will it get done before the election, but also like if more and more evidence comes out and if these indictments do go, if he has to turn himself in once again, the third time, a former president having to turn himself in and be arrested, let's just put that out there. If this happens again, I think the question becomes, and if more and more information comes out, does that at least give enough pause for voters to say, do we really want to deal with this?
Right. I mean, because he's slipped at least 6 or 8%.
Oh yeah.
Now, so.
Well, because look, and also the other good thing about this is too, this motherfucker now has to run for president with 3 indictments hanging over him.
That's hard.
Yeah. And like court dates and like depositions.
And he's about
to
have number 4. Because for sure, Georgia's going to go after him as well,
absolutely,
as they should.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, look, and Michigan, they just went after all of those fake electorates and charged them with like multiple counts. And I would almost bet every single one of them goes to jail.
Yes.
And so like, and like other states are probably going to follow suit with that as well, like Arizona and Georgia and places like that. Yep. And so I think what it does is it at least, I think the good thing that comes out of it, if nothing else, is people are warned to not try it again.
Yeah.
And that's important. That is an important thing. It's important for people to know if you try to fucking overthrow the United States government, you're going to go to jail. You're going to get you're going to be punished. You're not going to get off scot-free. That applies to people. That applies to people rioting on the Capitol just as much as it applies or should apply to the former president of the United States. You cannot do this in a civilized society. And if you do it, you're going to be fucking punished. And I mean, I think there is a world in which Donald Trump gets convicted of every single charge against him.
Yeah.
I mean, dude's facing like 200 years in jail. Like, I mean, and people want to just sit back and be like, oh, it's a conspiracy. It's this. I'm like, look, the first one, okay, whatever. This is now the third of what's probably going to be at least 4. At some point, you have to say, it's like the Bill Cosby thing, right? 2 or 3 people come out against him and you're like, well, when 80-something people are against him, you're like, well, even if 5 of those people are telling the truth, that's pretty damning. Even if one of these things is true, it's enough for him to go to jail, and it should be enough to keep him from being president again.
Jack Smith knows what he's doing. This guy. To be fair, I think that Trump's biggest worry is the fact that Jack Smith is no Mueller, right? He's no Mueller. He's no Mueller. He's not gonna milquetoast it.
No,
he's gonna hit him, and likely he has the communications between Trump's people that support this. And man, if those communications contain explicit language, much in the way some of the other stuff, that recording of Trump, for instance, with the secret documents in Florida, I bet you he's got stuff that powerful, as well as I bet you the Georgia charges. There are at least what we know from that silly chick that was on the jury in the grand jury in Georgia that came out and leaked it. There are at least 2 other recordings of Trump trying to grind people to find votes or worse in Georgia. You have all this stuff out there. You're done.
A lot of people think
you have multiple charges that would take you being on tape talking shit, and they exist in multiple charges.
A lot of people think the Georgia charges could be the best case and the most damning.
Yeah.
A lot of people, and that's the one that hasn't come yet, which tells me they are building a stockpile of evidence.
Yeah,
because nobody wants to do another Russia collusion thing, right?
Nope.
Where we go through that and it turns out he did, no one, Jack Smith, nobody is going to let that happen again. Nobody is putting charges against him unless they have a handful of evidence.
Right. But to be fair for Mueller, Trump wasn't, look, I'm going to say this. I don't think Trump was colluding.
But no, look at all the other people who went to jail, though. It's not like there wasn't any wrongdoing there.
Right. There was wrongdoing there.
Oh, yeah.
For sure, Trump wasn't like, I'm just saying this. I know there are people that tell me, they're going to tell me I'm wrong in this. It wasn't like, yeah, Putin, I got that. Yeah, we're going to do that.
No,
that wasn't happening.
No,
but
of course
to be
it
fair,
wasn't.
just like during his entire tenure as the head of a construction company in New York, he was absolutely a pawn on the table of the mafia criminal Putin. He was absolutely being pushed around like a big fucking chess piece. And so the problem is that that's not collusion, and that's why the Mueller case didn't go anywhere, because it wasn't. Look, you can be a boob, and that's not illegal. You're just a boob, right? And maybe the push should have been not collusion. And I think that I'm agreeing with you here. I don't think any of these prosecutors are going to allow for a mischaracterization of what they're doing to derail them when the charges finally hit.
No. And and so I'm, the big question is always like, what effect does this have on his base? And look, I don't know.
Much.
Like, not much. Like, they're all in. They're all in on Trump. Like, it doesn't matter what the fuck he does. Like, remember when he said he could shoot somebody on and no one would care? Like, that's those people. No one would fucking care. But all of these political races now for the last 23 years are so razor thin that, like, it's not those people you got to get. It's the moderates. It's the centrists. It's the people on the fringes.
Right.
Like, those are the folks that you have to convince. And I think a lot of those people are not going to be too happy about the idea of voting for someone who has that many indictments hanging over them.
Yeah, let's see what happens in Iowa. Because if Trump underperforms in Iowa, right?
Yeah.
We might,
and he doesn't have to lose. He just has to underperform.
Correct.
He has to have that line between him and second place just has to shrink. Yep. Because Chris Christie is doing great in New Hampshire. Like, he's already rocketed up to third place. A lot of people think he might even get up to second place by the time that primary comes around.
Wait. Like, so is the first one in New Hampshire? Did I just say Iowa? Like, I'm stupid?
Like, I thought. I've gotten confused the last couple of weeks because
they keep messing around with it.
I think it's Iowa. I want to say it's Iowa, but then someone said the other day it was New Hampshire, and I was like, I don't think it's New Hampshire, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, when is the first?
Wait, hold on. I love that it should be easy to find this, but it's proving. Okay, here we go.
First presidential primary. First presidential.
God. Really? Like, really? I can't find this information on the internet. It's Iowa. I thought it was Iowa.
It was Iowa. Okay.
So it's Iowa, and then South Carolina, and then so New Hampshire isn't even the second according to this, but this doesn't seem right. I don't know.
Well,
I get so confused on this.
Here's key. Is how so. If in Iowa,
this is the Clueless part, everybody. This is the Clueless part of the Center Clueless podcast.
Yeah. if he doesn't do well in Iowa, and let me see what's the polling. Right, that's what I'm looking at now. Good, 538's got it. Right now, you're looking at Trump 46%. Trump. Oh wait, so what's the total? You're looking at Trump between 40 and 50, and DeSantis between 18 and 21, although he's been as high as 33%. I wonder who else is going on.
Okay, I am no longer clueless. So January 15th is Iowa. January 23rd is New Hampshire, and then February 3rd is South Carolina. That's what I thought it was that order. And that's right. Yeah. So it is Iowa, New Hampshire, and then South Carolina. But let's be clear, like Iowa, the last three people to win Iowa were like Mike Huckabee, Rick Santorum, and Ted Cruz.
Right.
So we understand that Iowa doesn't really mean jack shit about who's going to get the nomination.
But for what you said, for there to show Trump faltering.
Yes.
Here's the thing. Part of the reason why Trump, I'm going to assert, and I don't know this like I'm a scientist of some sort or a data scientist, I think that it's going to take some slippage to allow other Republicans to slip. Do you know what I'm saying? They're already too committed. And this, they're committed to the narrative of Trump being, persecuted. They're committed to that sort of, he's a victim bullshit line.
Yeah.
And as people run from him, it will allow others to do that. And man, as the news, because that the liberal left news, they're going to hammer and show 24/7 him as they do. Every time something new comes up, it becomes wall-to-wall news coverage for a week. And a lot of these things look like they're going to be going down in 2024, right before the election.
Yep.
And what Trump's going to do, and what Trump's handlers at the time are going to do, and what many people in the Republican Party who are still pro-Trump are going to do, are going to say, "See, they're cheating again."
Oh yeah, no, it's election interference. And it's like, I mean, there's nothing on the books that says you can't be convicted of a crime while you are running for president.
Yeah.
Sorry, like that's the way it is. Them's the breaks, my dude. Them's the breaks. And I think Trump has to really slip for any candidate to make any headway, and he's going to have to slip more than he is now. If let's say Iowa comes and he wins by even 5 or 6 points, that's still lower than people are expecting, right? That's still a tighter margin.
He should be like plus 23.
Yeah. So let's say that let's say by all intents, let's say he loses, right? Let's say he loses Iowa. Let's say Christie makes a surge and takes New Hampshire.
Or
Trump's still not out of it, right? Still not out of it.
I want to see the debates. To be honest, that's what I'm looking forward to, are the debates.
Me too. Because I think the debates are where Chris Christie has the best chance to surge.
Not only Chris Christie, I'm saying that the debates are going to be where the intellectually superior Republican candidates, they're going to band together. I'm not saying they're going to talk off screen. They all know going in there, all we got to do is talk about substantial things and the data around it. And it's not going to make Trump look good. And it's only going to make them look better. And so they're going to come in there, all of them. Scott, DeSantis, Haley.
They're all going to come in there. But the difference is that they go against Donald Trump while still trying to not. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too.
That's why the debates will suss this out.
Well, yes, but if they take that same approach in the debates where they're trying to talk about which a lot of them are doing, which is Donald Trump started out doing so good and we appreciate what he did, but which is what they're all doing except for Christie. Christie is the only one out there saying this man is dangerous. He does not need to be in office. He's a failure. He's a loser. Christie is the only one out there actually completely railing against Donald Trump. And it'll be interesting to see how Trump responds to that. Because if he even debates, right? Christie seems pretty confident that he's going to debate.
He's not going to debate.
I don't know. I understand what Christie says when he says that his ego is too big to let people talk about him without him being there. And I understand that to a degree. And so I'm I don't know. I'm torn. I think he could just as well debate as not debate.
I think that what he's going to do is he may do 1 or 2 debates. But what he's going to default to, and it'll be interesting to see what he does, he's going to default to answering afterwards on Truth Social, as an example, right?
Well, possibly so. I don't know that helps him win voters over, right? That's the problem. there are a lot of people on the margins who aren't on Truth Social and don't want to be on Truth Social and don't give a shit.
Right.
And
How about this? Do you think Trump goes back to Twitter during this time? Because he's allowed on.
He's allowed on. Ugh. No, I almost think he's too proud to do it.
I don't know. I feel
like if he was going to, he would have already done it.
Yeah.
And if he does, it undermines Truth Social. So it's like, it almost costs him money to go on Twitter.
It tanks Truth Social. It will tank Truth Social.
Yeah. And so it's like, I don't think he'll do that. I think he's happy in his own little bubble, frankly. And I don't think he thinks he needs it. I think he firmly believes right now that he is the front runner. He is going to win the nomination. It is a done deal. Yeah. And I don't think he gives a shit about it. I don't think he thinks he needs it. And which is why if he doesn't debate, that's why he thinks I don't need to debate. I've got this in the bag.
Yeah.
And
he may.
On that note, good podcast, Erik.
It was good. Yeah, today was pretty good. I actually have homework from this fucking podcast now. I can't. 1946, A Mistranslation by Kathy Baldock.
Shifted a culture. Yeah,
that's insane. That I'm just gonna one more. I know I've already said this, and now I'm bouncing the Rubble. That is fucking insane. Because I'll tell you now. It's funny is in my the family I'm part of now, my wife's family, very religious, right?
Yeah.
And the conversation around this has had many people in religious families are uncomfortable with talking about this because of that. And I'm absolutely, if I'm gonna get this, I'm gonna read it, and if it is, I'm gonna talk about it because I'm like, yeah, that's not even something that was an issue in the Bible. Why are we even talking about this?
I'm gonna reach out to Kathy and see if I can get her on the show, which I bet we can. I'm gonna see about getting Kathy on the show, and we can just have a deep dive, and that can be the whole episode.
I want
just a deep dive discussion
really
about
want
it.
That. Yeah. I have no idea. You have no idea how much I want that.
Well, I'm going to reach out and try to make that happen. So that'll be a fun one. So the Center Clueless podcast is produced by Ryan Verrill. Hi, Ryan. Please visit us at centerclueless.com for more information or find us on the socials, not Truth Social, at Center Clueless. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and tell your friends to tune in. If you have a question, comment, or criticism, you can email us at centerclueless@gmail.com. And until next time, whether you're left, right, or somewhere in the center, we hope you're a little less clueless, just like us.